Thank you, Robert. I have the pleasure of introducing our presenter for today, Pat Hughes from the Illinois Opportunity Project. Patrick Hughes serves as a featured speaker for the Illinois Opportunity Project, a public policy enterprise that promotes legislative solutions in advance of free markets and free minds. In his role, Pat focuses on educating and mobilizing Illinoisans through a statewide grassroots effort, promoting legislation rooted in economic freedom and recruiting, supporting, and advising the next generation of conservative leaders. Mr. Hughes also serves as president of the Liberty Justice Center, a free market public interest law firm that advances liberty through legal action. The Liberty Justice Center pursues litigation that increases economic liberty, protects private property rights, and enforces constitutional limits on government's power. Pat is an attorney, a real estate developer, and a home builder with interests in various developmental entities. He lives in Hinsdale with his wife Susan and their 3 children. Please help me welcome Mr. Pat Hughes. I just want you to know that bio is quite a mouthful.
Thank you all for having me out this morning. I'm a little tired because I was up watching the Hawks game last night, so I was happy for that. When I'm listening to your opening comments, it's great what you do. It's great to hear everybody stand up and share their life experience, and it's great to see a combination of business leaders and leaders of the community, including the schools, which is an important combination, right? Because it's the folks at the schools who are going to give you your employees and the people that are going to take over those positions when it's time for you to retire. So the fact that you're here in combination is an interesting dynamic of what the future of this area and this chamber is going to be able to do, not just today or tomorrow, but going forward. In the spirit of all of you standing up and introducing yourself, I'll introduce myself. My name is Pat Hughes. I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago. I went to Marquette University and DePaul University for law school. I met my wife in law school. And I was an attorney for a number of years. And after about 6 years of practicing in a very large firm as a litigator, I realized what you all probably know, which is the world has plenty of attorneys, and they wouldn't miss me if I was gone. So the entrepreneurial bug bit me, and I decided to get into business. I had represented a series of developer clients and large home building clients when I was an attorney, and I decided to get into home building. And now I'm a real estate developer, and I manage over 6,000 lots in the southwest suburbs. But it didn't start that way. It started with literally one house. I had a partner, a guy who's out from this way, a guy named John Kelly. Does anybody know the builder John Kelly? He's from Tinley. And John's a great guy. He was my partner on my first house. And that's how it started. I went into Hinsdale, where I live now, and in Hinsdale, and maybe this is true here, there was a teardown craze in the early 2000s where you would take a house that was, quite frankly, past its useful life, but the lot had some value, and we would take that house, tear it down, and build a new house on it. And I started at a great time. It was 2003, 2004. The economy was great. The real estate economy was great. And I was starting a new venture. It was my first sort of small business that I had ever operated. And I had John as a partner. And the first transaction went really, really well. And the reason it went well was because, in order to build a house, there's a lot of players involved, not unlike this organization here. I had to go and get an investor to help, seed the capital for the project to work. And then we had to go to the bankers here to get a loan, a construction loan. And that helped us get everything started. And that would allow me to hire, all our subcontractors, all our trades, the concrete guys, the drywall guys, the people who do plumbing and the HVAC and the electric. And all across the chain, all across the line of building that house, everybody was happy. The person who we bought the house from was happy because, frankly, it was their retirement nest egg. And they were grateful for the price that we gave them and that they were able to move on to the next phase of their life. The bank was happy because we paid them a good amount of money on their interest and we paid it timely. Our investor was happy because ultimately we made money. And we were happy because ultimately we made money too. And our trades, each one of those folks, and the people that they employed, they were all happy because they had work to provide for their families, and to set themselves up to expand their business and move on to the next job. And then, of course, the people who moved in were happy. But what's little known in that little scenario that I just told you is that the best and most happy people were the local government agencies. And the reason that was is we took a house that was worth about $400,000 and replaced it with a house that was worth about $1.3 million. And when that increase in value went up, well, the tax base increased. And when the tax base increased, the local school district, the local park district, the local organizations within the area who all share in that increase in tax, they all grew their coffers as well. It was a great example of a booming economy leading to economic growth that ultimately led to increased revenue to the local municipality and, frankly, to the surrounding governmental entities and to the state. And that was 2003 and 2004. By 2007, 2008, that was all over with. And the money that I was making, the money my partners were making, that was turning into losses. And I'm sure you guys experienced much of the same circumstance. And what happened from 2003 when I started building that first house to 2008 when I was trying to get rid of the houses that I had still available, it became clearer to us as the economy declined and the crash took place what was really going on with the policies that were in place from our government. You know, when the things are going well and everybody's making money and everybody's happy, we pay very little attention to what's going around us from a policy perspective or from a political perspective. But when things get bad, that changes. And so in 2008 and 2009, I started to realize that the policies that were in place in our state and in our nation weren't the correct policies. And because real estate was a little bit slow and I had a little time on my hand, I got involved in politics for the first time in my life at 4 years old. And my first involvement in politics was to run for the United States Senate. I ran against now Senator Mark Kirk in the Republican primary. I finished second to Senator Kirk and then helped him and then gubernatorial nominee Bill Brady in their elections. Now it's going to be Bruce Romer. And what I learned in that process was the policies that are in place in our state do not promote economic growth. They don't promote the things that will help your businesses locally. And frankly, they don't promote the growth that requires the tax base to grow enough to allow revenue sharing so that our schools get enough funding and our parks get enough funding. You cannot tax your way out of these problems. And so, so that's how I came to be to this position and the position I am now, sort of advocating for small government reform throughout our state, and throughout our politics. And in 2011, you guys are aware in 2011, the governor and some of the folks down in Springfield raised both our individual and our corporate income taxes. And they promised that income tax increase would be temporary. And as of yesterday, we learned that for at least now it's going to stay temporary. They failed to make it permanent, which is great news. But what happened in 2011 is we increased our taxes while our neighbors in Indiana and Wisconsin held their tax baseline there. And while Indiana and Wisconsin were reining in their spending, we continued to spend. And the politicians promised that if we increased the taxes in 2011, they would use that money to pay down the bills that our state owed and get us out of debt. Well, what's happened since that time? Well, we have $7 billion in unpaid debt. None of that's been paid off. Our credit rating, how we can borrow money as a state, has been increased several times. I think it's up to 5 now. And the state is in economic decline in comparison to its neighbors. So if someone has a small business or a young college student or a young college graduate that wants to go out and find work, it's going to be harder for you folks to find people to come and work with you, work for you. It's going to be hard for you to grow your branch from 8 people to 15 people because the policies that are in place are not allowing that type of growth. Now, we're lucky that the tax increase was not made permanent recently, but that's just a reprieve. In 6 months, that may change and it may become permanent, and more businesses and more people will flee, and less businesses will be incentivized to come to Tinley Park and the surrounding area to provide jobs and enthusiasm and growth to the area. So the seminal question when I talk about, and I go all over the state to groups like this and others to talk about, is what are we going to do as a chamber of commerce, as a political organization, as an activist group? What are we going to do to make sure that the policies are put in place for your businesses to grow, for your community to grow, and for your children and grandchildren to have a secure future, a future that currently is not secure. And there are 5 areas that we need to focus on to see if the outlook for Illinois' economy in 2014 and 15 and 16 and beyond is going to be better than it was from 2008 until now. The first one, and I've touched on this already, is taxation. We have very high taxes in Illinois, as I'm sure you guys are aware, and a lot of the tax base goes to fund very important projects like schools, like parks, like aid to the developmentally disabled. But frankly, the schools, the parks, the developmentally disabled, they don't get as much money as they should because so much of our tax dollars are going to pay for other structural debts that are owed to mostly unionized state employees throughout the state through the pension system. And so we tried to tax our way out of that circumstance in the best way. What we need to do instead is, first of all, make sure that the tax increase that was not made temporary, not made permanent, stays temporary and it expires, it stays expired at the end of this year, regardless of who's elected governor. And then subsequent to that, every single person in this room should be agitating with their state representative, their state senator, or their congressman, the governor, all the way up the chain to reduce the tax burden on taxpayers in the state, specifically the income, individual income and corporate income tax, and getting rid of the estate tax. It's critical, and here's the reality, and this has been explained time and again, especially in times of economic decline. When taxes are decreased and more money is left in your pockets to pay your vendors, to pay your employees, for them to spend in the community, you will ultimately have economic growth across the board, in Tinley and beyond, throughout the state. And the economic pie and the revenue generated to the state as a consequence of that will increase. It will increase over time. And the state will have more money to pay for schools, for parks, for the services that we want, to help the developmentally disabled. So lowering our tax burden up front is number one. And if we have a new governor, and if we have new legislators, that's something that's possible. So not just freezing our taxes where they are, but actually lowering them, making us more competitive with our neighboring states, Indiana and Wisconsin, who frankly are taking jobs and businesses from us all the time. So that's number one. Number two is spending. Illinois, not unlike the government of the United States of America, does not have a revenue problem. It has a spending problem. We increased taxes, slowly after the economy grew. We have more money in the coffers in our state now than we did previously, but we still have the $7 billion in unpaid bills that I referenced earlier. Why do we have that? Well, we have that basically because the people who are in charge down there are okay with having $7 billion in unpaid bills. They're using that money to curry favor with the folks that lobby them for, whatever it is they're lobbying for. And so what we need to do as a group, as a society, as a state, is to incorporate a statutory spending freeze or a statutory spending limit where we stop how much we spend at the current level and leave it, and not allow the people in government, for whatever means, particularly through the governor, to increase spending in opposition to that statute. And it will only be raised based on the cost of inflation, as inflation grew, and by population growth. Other than that, it would stay exactly the same. The level of spending would stay the same. Because typically what happens is we just spend more and more money. And if we bring in more money by reducing taxes and leading to economic growth, the government has a tendency to want to spend all of that money. So we have to put an actual cap on that statutorily to prevent it from doing it. So you do those two things in place. We can figure out in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years with our leaders in government to change those two things. Then we have a chance at addressing number 3. And number 3 is debt. Right? Our state is in an enormous amount of debt. We have an unfunded pension, underfunded pension, tens of billions of dollars. And if you have a statutory spending cap, and then you have increased revenue, we have an opportunity to use the spread or the delta between those two things to pay down the debt that is owed. So we are not burdening my children, I have 3 children, your children, your grandchildren, with debt for as far as the eye can see, particularly because, as you guys know better than anyone, being here this morning, being here every month, going into the community, so much of this is done locally. And what we can change is what we can change here, locally, right here in our community, right here in our state. The federal government, which seems far away, as it is already saddling our kids and grandkids with an enormous amount of debt that is going to take years and years and years to figure out how to deal with. There is absolutely no reason in the great state of Illinois why we would pile on top of that. So if we're able to do the first 2 things that I talked about and start paying down the debt, then we can get to the thing that we really want to be able to do, which is have budgetary surpluses, which can be done with discipline and with the right economic model, so that we can start handing money back to the taxpayers. There are states, Texas is a good example, it's no income tax. There's no income tax, right? Huge economic growth in Texas, right? Lots of businesses want to go there. Why? The cost of doing business is cheap. You keep more of your money. You can reinvest more of your money into your company, into goods and services, into employees, into R&D, into research, into whatever it is that you want to do. And there's an economic multiplier of 6 and 7 times when that happens. So those are important as well. The 4th thing, and I'm so glad we have educators here, because, frankly, the next generation of leader is going to come right out of these grade schools and high schools that are here. In fact, I have an 8th grader, my oldest is 8th grade, she just graduated on Tuesday night, she's going off to high school next year. So I know how critical it is for us to have great teachers, great administrators, great people involved in the schools to make it work. But the way they're funded currently, maybe not necessarily here in Tinley Park, maybe not in Hinsdale where I live, but across the state, the way they're funded is a giant mistake. When you look at the city of Chicago, these kids have no chance. They have almost no chance. I think the number is that if you come in as a freshman, 50% of those kids even graduate from high school. Their opportunity of graduating from college is in the low single digits when they enter into Chicago Public High School. Does that mean that there's not enough money flowing through Chicago Public High Schools? Absolutely not. I think the price or average fee per student or cost per student is about $14,000, which is plenty of money to educate a young kid. There is a problem with how the dollars flow and who they flow. They flow exclusively between the powers that be, in the case of the city of Chicago Mayor, Rahm Emanuel, and the Chicago Teachers Union, parent groups. And they're making deals to do whatever it is that they're doing and the kids are suffering. So what we need to do is we have to have a more dynamic way of funding education, and particularly for those who are in need. And the way we think we should do that is there should be an advancement of charter schools throughout the state, so that kids have an opportunity to choose a different school than the one that they're in if that doesn't suit their needs. And secondarily, a voucher program, where the money follows the parents and follows the students, so those kids can have a chance at choosing where they want to go to school. And I recognize when you have great schools like you guys have out here, or that we have out by me, it's less of an issue. You send your kid to a wonderful school every day, and so that's a little off the radar. But for the rest of the state, it's not just the city of Chicago. In some of the more poor, rural parts of the state, I've traveled the entire state, this is a major, major issue. And if we can help those kids while we're helping our own kids through economic opportunities, through having the money follow them to the parents, instead of going into the unions and to the districts, it'll make an enormous difference because the talent pool of our state will grow. The ability to have more better educated people will flow. And the more talent you have, young talent you have in the state, the more dynamic it is, the more opportunity there is for growth, the more opportunity there will be for your businesses, even if you're 10, 20, 50, 300 miles away. The last issue is the pension crisis. We have, I think the number is somewhere between 70 and 100 billion dollars in unfunded pension. And the reason for that is our prior people in power made promises to generations of state employees that they simply could not keep. Those state employees now feel that they are entitled to the money that they were promised. Frankly, it's hard to argue with them from a moral perspective because they were promised that money. But the reality of it is there isn't enough money. There isn't going to be enough money. The most recent pension reform that passed and was signed into legislation will not solve the problem. And those folks ultimately need to have their retirement age raised, which I know is not going to be popular. The younger folks that are not in the system for a long, long time are going to need to be put on a defined contribution plan instead of a defined benefits plan, or it is simply unsustainable. And if that is not addressed, and that large pension debt, which is so much of our revenue that we pour into our state coffers every year, is not addressed, it will be impossible for us to climb out of this hole. And so that needs to be a major priority of folks like you when you're talking to your state legislators, when you're talking to your governor, whoever that might be. If we can address those 5 things, our economic outlook for 2014 and 15 and 16 and beyond will be very good. Because here's the deal. When it got to be 2008 and I went to build that house again, nobody was happy anymore. Because I couldn't pay as much for the lot as I paid the first time. And the bank said, hey Pat, I know I gave you this loan, 0.3 before, but things aren't what they used to be. I need a couple of points. And my investor said, yeah, I'm going to sit this one out because your bank's too much money, and I don't like what's happening on the TV and on the radio, and I'm reading a lot of stuff that the real estate market is collapsing, right? And then, of course, I don't make any money, and that's not good for my family and what we're trying to accomplish. Every single subcontractor that I hire a bunch of them. They don't get work. And when they don't get work, they got to let people go. When they let people go, those people have to go find work elsewhere. If they can't, they got to get help from the state. And the state's paying out the revenue that they don't have, and the cycle goes on and on and on and on, and it has to stop. There is so much just in listening to you guys this morning talk, the enthusiasm, the way you address each other, the respect and the enthusiasm that you have. I can see it. This is a great group. I can see just in the little time I've been here. You have the opportunity to do a lot for this community, and I know that you do. But you also have the opportunity to do a lot that goes beyond what happens here. Get involved with this stuff. It's important. If for no other reason than it will help you economically. It will help your bottom line. So if you're spending time on your business every day, thinking about how to make it grow, spend a little bit of time lobbying your legislator. Spend a little bit of time calling your senator. Spend a little bit of time attending a political meeting. And the reason is, it's part of the business plan. In this state, a state where there is transactional politics going on every day, being involved in politics, the political process, and the policy process should be part of your business plan. Because it will help you ultimately grow your business and make more money and secure a more successful future for yourself and for your community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Let's go on to our chamber committee reports, and we're going to start with our ambassador committee, Mr. Pat Hughes.
Good morning, everybody. I'm the chairperson of the ambassador committee.